بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters, December 4th is designated as an awareness day for Disability Awareness Day. And the purpose of this Awareness Day is to create better understanding of the challenges and the struggles that people with disability go through in this life. In some societies and in some cultures, disability is seen as something to be ashamed of. And accordingly, people who are disabled are neglected and sometimes even mocked and ridiculed. And in many countries, we see people who are disabled begging in the streets and living in very dire situations. And because of that, an awareness day has been established so that people will be more considerate, more kind, and more understanding. In Islam, we are taught to be always considerate of other people and never ever mock other people for whatever reason, whether it's their color or it is their ethnicity or it is their physical limitations or disabilities. In Surah Al-Hujurat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكون خيرا منهن. So this verse clearly says that men should not mock other men or women should not mock other women. And mocking could be for different reasons, and one of the reasons could also be disability. So people who are disabled, it's not their choice to be disabled, but circumstances. Some people are born with disability, some people they are born healthy, but accidents happen or they are inflicted with some kind of disease that caused them to be in a situation of disability. And everyone is prone to the possibility of at any time that they could be disabled. So the Quran teaches us not to mock anyone. And further to this, the Quran teaches us not to call people with offensive names. وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَلَا تَنَابَذُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. And offensive names could be sometimes related to a disability that a person has. In some cultures, we do see that people call a person who's disabled with in a way that's demeaning and in a way that's belittling. So respecting people and accepting them the way Allah has created them, or accepting them with whatever situation they might be, is essential. And accordingly, regardless of whether a person is physically in good shape or disabled, they deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. Further to this, my dear sisters, we are taught in Islam to accommodate people who might have physical disabilities and limitations. In Surah Al-Fatih, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives exemptions to people who are disabled from a major collective social responsibility. And the verse says, لَيْسَ عَلَى الْأَعْمَى حَرَجٌ وَلَا عَلَى الْأَعْرَجِ حَرَجٌ وَلَا عَلَى الْمَرِيضِ حَرَجٌ. Meaning that a person who's blind, or a person who is disabled and not being able to walk easily, or a person who is ill for whatever reasons, they are exempt from this duty or from this particular responsibility. And this, my dear brothers and sisters, teaches us that in every situation and in every circumstance, we need to take measures to accommodate those who are in need and those who might have disabilities. For example, here in our country, we have something very positive when it comes to people with disability. There is a city regulation or requirement that in public spaces, it must be the public spaces, they must be accessible to people who are on wheelchair. Similarly, there are reserved spots for people who need, or people who have disabilities. And even in our tax law, there is disability credit, and so on and so forth. All these measures, my dear brothers and sisters, are in essence Islamic, in a sense that Islam teaches us to accommodate those who have disability, as we have seen in the verse I just mentioned from Surah Al-Fatih, Surah 48, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made exemptions for people who are or who have disabilities. Then we should understand from that, as a society, as a community, in every situation, we should always keep in mind not only the needs of those who are healthy and strong, but also the needs of those who are disabled, whether it's parking, whether it is access to the building. In every way, in every situation, we should be considerate of them. Further to this, my dear brothers and sisters, people who are disabled, we should not see them as a burden. On the contrary, they are a blessing, in a sense that the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, إِنَّمَا تُنصَرُونَ وَتُرْزَقُونَ بِضُعَفَائِكُمْ. That he said you achieve victory and provisions of sustenance because of the weak amongst you, meaning the dua of the weak and the one who has, challenges, and the ones who are on the margin of society. These are the ones that bring the blessing of Allah upon society. So they are not a burden, rather they are a source of blessing for us, and accordingly we should treat them with the highest regard and respect. My dear brothers and sisters, our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was corrected once for the way he received a blind man. And this is mentioned in Surah Abasa. And this blind man was Abdullah ibn Maktoum. He was among those who entered Islam at an early time. And a person like Abdullah ibn Maktoum, being blind and disabled, in the Meccan society and other similar societies, would not be treated with much respect. So the Prophet ﷺ, as he was talking to some of the rich and powerful leaders of Mecca, he came to approach the Prophet. And the Prophet was not neglectful of him, but he was eager to engage those leaders, and he did not respond to him right away. And this is where he was corrected, that he should have paid attention to him and that he should have listened to him. And the Prophet ﷺ used to show a great degree of respect for this companion, Abdullah ibn Maktoum. Further, my dear brothers and sisters, physical disability doesn't mean disabled people have to be put on the margin of society. It doesn't mean that they cannot contribute. It doesn't mean that they cannot play important roles in society. We see at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the second muezzin was Bilal, and azan is an important function in Islam. The second muezzin, the second caller for azan, with Bilal was Abdullah ibn Maktoum, this blind man. Further to this, when the Prophet ﷺ would leave the city of Medina for any type of engagement, he would assign Abdullah ibn Maktoum to be in charge and to lead the prayers. And the prayer is the most important function, and nobody would come and say a blind person cannot lead. The Prophet ﷺ used to assign him to lead the prayer whenever he would leave the city of Medina. So we learn from all of this, my dear sisters, to always show the highest regard and respect for people in general, and in particular, people who are in difficult situations, people who have physical needs, physical limitations. And whenever we engage in something, in part of our planning should include the needs of those who are disabled. In a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said once to his companions that every human joint, على كل سلامة من ابن آدم صدقة, that every human joint should give charity, or on behalf of every joint that we have, we should give charity. And the companions felt that was a little bit too much, thinking of that in monetary terms. But the Prophet ﷺ explained to them that a smile is a charity, removing a harmful object from the pathway of people is charity. And he went on to say that guiding a blind person is a charity, helping someone who is deaf or who cannot hear to understand, that's also an act of charity. So taking care of those who are in need of help, those who are disabled, is a virtuous act in Islam. So my dear brothers and sisters, let's remember these important principles in our faith, and let's not think that taking care or accommodating the disabled is just a city regulation or requirement, but this is first and foremost an Islamic requirement. My dear brothers and sisters, I am not here generalizing, but unfortunately sometimes within our communities there are certain behaviors that unfortunately go contrary to the teachings of our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where we fail to be considerate of the disabled amongst us. And let me give you two examples. When we come to the mosque, there are shoe racks. Unfortunately, sometimes those shoe racks remain half empty, and people just throw their shoe everywhere, blocking the way. And it was one Jum'ah, a brother on a wheelchair came, and he could not go into the masjid. Why? Because the shoe was all over, and he has to wait for someone to take all that shoe and open a path for him. So my dear brothers and sisters, if we have the spirit of praying Jum'ah, if we have the spirit of understanding the essence of our deen, our faith, we should never do that. Putting our shoe in a shoe rack only takes half a second. But when we throw our shoe in the pathway, we block someone with a wheelchair. Not only that, There might be somebody who is visually impaired, or there might be an elderly who could step on that and fall, or somebody who might be struggling with their body, was keeping their balance. So unfortunately, this reflects fail of consideration of the weakest amongst us. And the Prophet ﷺ, even when he used to pray, he would shorten his prayer in consideration of others. So lack of consideration sometimes is an issue, and I encourage us all to always be considerate of the weak, of the disabled. Even if we have only one disabled person, we have to be considerate of them and be accommodative. Another example, my dear brothers and sisters, around our mosques, we have few spots reserved for people with disability. But unfortunately, and that's very disturbing, people who are physically able, they go and use them. And that's very unfortunate. And let me tell you an example I have seen myself. There was an elderly man who was in his late 80s, and he had heart surgery, and physically he was not in the best situation. And he was told by his doctors to minimize his movements. But because he was so eager to pray Friday Jum'ah and to meet people, he would drive and come to the mosque, and he would park in the handy parking, and then he would walk into the masjid. So only a few steps of walking. Now it was a cold winter day, and this man came driving, and he found the handy spots, all of them taken away. And there were about 2 and 3, this is a downtown mosque, spots only. And then he decided to go home because he cannot park far away. It was winter, it was cold, and he is also somebody who have physical challenges. He decided to go home. And surprisingly, my dear brothers and sisters, those parking spots that are designated for a handy, they were taken by few individuals who all of them were healthy and strong, and they don't have even permission to park there. So my dear brothers and sisters, let's be very considerate of those who are disabled, whatever that disability is, and should not be always thinking in the terms that everyone is physically as strong as we are. Taking care of those who are disabled, showing kindness to them, being considerate of them, helping them in every way, in every shape possible, is an Islamic requirement. It's a virtue, and it's something that we should never hesitate to do, and we should never think that all the regulations that we have in place to help the handy is just a city requirement or a traffic requirement. No, these are Islamic requirements, and in essence and in substance. Thank you for listening to me. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.